Call Mike Russell to wind up the Government Cabinet Secretary. 9 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I have had many occasions during this debate to reflect on what a strange collection of people the Scottish Tories are. They are a party that was entirely saved by the process of establishing this Parliament. They were virtually extinct in Scotland. Their present vote is actually not as high as they got in the 1980s in Scotland. They have no ambition for this Parliament. They have no ambition for Scotland. And indeed, they spend most of their time, and I have to say the last speech proves it, talking down Scotland. Apparently, people don't want to come here. I mean, that is the message that Jackson Carlisle just told people on television. They shouldn't come here. They don't want, no thank you, they don't want to come here. But of course, I know why they're miserable and conflicted. Because they don't want to be here. Because they are the prime exponents of Dr. Johnson's view that the noblest prospect which a Scotsman ever sees is the high road that leads him to England. But they're frustrated by that because there are no opportunities for them to go to the Westminster Parliament. David Mundell escaped. The rest of them are condemned to suffer here because they can't get, because
settle down, please. Settle down.
Officer, there is the anguish of the damned. They cannot go anywhere else because nobody will elect them to the Westminster Parliament. So we have to put up with them. They try, like John Lamont, but they fail. And the arguments in this debate are quite interesting when you look at them in that context, because there are basically four. There is that alienation from the Scottish Parliament and from Scottish politics from the so-called Scottish Tories. And then there is the why, the how and the what of Brexit. And the why is the way in which the Tories, but of course with some Labour members, approached the business of the vote itself. A UK vote, apparently, Scotland's results are not relevant, despite the profound change that is going to be caused in Scotland by what is taking place. The most important, the most devastating change in several generations. Surely there's a need at the very least, even if you don't accept the issue of Scottish democratic choice, to reconcile that choice with the UK choice. But the Tories say, no, we will not do that. Well, I'll tell you why I recognise Scottish democracy, and this might be a hint to the Scottish Tories of why they do so badly. This is the Scottish Parliament. The people who voted us are Scottish voters. They want us to stand up for Scotland. Then there's the how of this process, the process of leaving.
Sit down, Mr. Whipple, please.
Apparently we should just join in. No matter what happens in the JMC, we should just join in. Now, I'll go to the JMC. I'll be there tomorrow. I see what is happening. You don't have to take my word for it. If you want to get the Welsh Brexit Minister to come and give evidence to this Parliament, I'm sure he'd be pleased to do so. I think he would tell you what I have told you, that this is a profoundly dispiriting process. And indeed, the government in Wales has a Liberal Democrat member. I think she would tell you. The reality is that the JMC process doesn't work. It's never worked. Every analysis of it shows it doesn't work, but we're trying to make it work. If only the UK government would do the same. And then there's the what of this. Belief certainly held by the Tories and held by Labour and by others that in some sense the arguments we're putting forward are a stalking horse for independence. Now, the reality is that the Scottish Government has put on the table a compromise position. It is, well, actually, that was accepted by the Secretary of State for Scotland, so they appear to be out of tune with their own man who made it to Westminster, unlike the rest. We are willing and keen to negotiate on this. We still wish to do so, and moreover, if some of the Tory members had read it, they would discover it answers the key questions that have been raised by them in debate, including the question of trade on page 100, paragraph 159. There are a range of issues raised here that deserve attention. And the reality of this is on the table. There are options in this that can be achieved. Whatever happens now is because the UK Tories take it off the table. They are the ones who are refusing to compromise. Now, when you look at those 3 points in this debate, you see all the contributions essentially contributing to them. Douglas Ross and Adam Tompkins, who really don't want to be here, and who don't like the fact that they've not made it elsewhere, but that's life. People just won't vote for them. John Lamont is the same. And I have to say that however, there were positive points too. And I was impressed by members, no, not across the chamber because I heard none from the Tories, but I was impressed by points made in other parties about the depth of analysis that the Scottish Government is trying to undertake on this matter, as opposed to the lack of analysis from the UK Government, about the openness to negotiation coming from all the devolved administrations, rather than the closed Tory view of the process, of the desire to be part of the world, to engage, to have an open view, which I have always agreed with, which is a definition of why I came into politics, and I'm glad to hear it from other benches too, and about particularly the richness of migration and the contribution made by EU citizens. Last week, Shona Robertson and I met a group of health service workers, and one contribution from them stuck in my mind. A doctor who had worked in the health service for 28 years from Germany, who said it was up to the UK if they wanted to make decisions on migration. But what really offended him beyond anything else, was the way he was being used by the UK Tories as a bargaining counter. A man who's made a profound contribution to this country being treated in that way. That is shameful, and the Tories should say it is shameful. No, there were, of course, presiding officers, extremist subsects in this debate, but I'll ignore them. I have to say, however, the belief that from Neil Findlay and Elaine Thompson that we can get rid of the bosses Europe by allowing the Tories to take us out of Europe is bizarre. Finally, presiding officer, let me make a point. Jackson Carlow attempted a definition of the word grievance. Let me give him the actual definition. It is a wrong or hardship suffered, which is the grounds of complaint. The false grievance was the Tory grievance against Europe. That was a false grievance. The real grievance, which we have to resolve, is being forced out of Europe against the democratic will of the people of Scotland. It's making proposals in good faith and having them ignored, and the negotiating process derailed by a UK government that isn't listening. And it is bringing a compromise to the table and having it rejected by people who never wanted it and hadn't read it. So what? No, I'm sorry, I'm just my last minute. So what are we going to do about those real issues? Well, we're going to tomorrow's JMC with a positive view and a willingness to talk. We're going to keep talking and make sure that we go on talking so that the Article 50 letter can still be influenced by the reasonable demands of Scotland. But what we are also going to do, presiding officer, is this: never allow Scotland to be humiliated and its democratic choice rejected. And we will never, ever turn our back on Europe and the world.